Hey everyone, and welcome to the channel. Today I'm going to be talking about Shortcomings by Adrian Tomine, and I have to thank Nick from another booktube channel for recommending this book. I think it was in his top 10 books of 2023, and this was absolutely a book I had a fantastic time with, had a lot of different emotions from, and in a way felt very cathartic from looking at it at a relationship perspective. So thanks again, Nick. Great recommendation, and I definitely recommend everybody watching this should read it. Now, quickly, I will say you might feel a little hoodwinked because this is technically not a novel. This is technically a graphic novel, which I know a lot of people probably are going to write it off just because of that, but I absolutely implore you to just give this medium a chance. There are so many great stories here that you are missing out on because you are afraid of there being some art in your books. The art in these absolutely enhances the story that's being told. There are just some emotions that a good artist is able to get across from just facial, body posture, all those kinds of things that really do come across in pages that the words alone don't do justice. And that is definitely something that I really appreciated about Shortcomings. With all that being said, what is Shortcomings about? Ben Tanaka has a problem. In addition to being rampantly cynical, sarcastic, and insensitive, his long-term relationship is awash in turmoil. His girlfriend, Miko Hiyashi, suspects that Ben has a wandering eye, and more to the point, it's wandering in the direction of white women. This accusation and its various implications become the subject of a heated, spiraling debate, setting in motion a story that pits California against New York, devotion against desire, and truth against truth. So some things that I think this book or graphic novel does very well is making you feel like you are a part of the stories. In 100 pages or so, Adrian Tomine is able to make me feel connected and empathetic towards multiple different characters in here, and it also just made me feel like I was there, that I was in this world. Not that this is some fantasy world or anything, you know, it's a modern depiction of the world we're living in currently, but I felt like I was there, that I knew these people and that their struggles were real. And I think that line at the end there of what this book is about, the truth against truth, is a huge theme that is worked upon multiple times in this book. Because I think the thing that this book does the best compared to everything else is it shows that there are definitely two sides to the same coin, and that while you might think something is true, somebody else could think something else is true, and that dynamic is super interesting. I think I mentioned that this book was kind of cathartic for me, and I think it will be for a lot of people. If you have ever been in a relationship that turns pretty toxic, and not necessarily in like an abusive way, but just drifting apart, the fighting, the little things that can tear a relationship apart. I mean, you know, most adults go through something like this when you're younger. Not every relationship can be a success. And throughout this book, I just felt such a connection to both Ben and Miko, because I have been in relationships that just kind of felt like this in different ways. I really think the biggest strength of this book is just having those raw emotions about a failing relationship come to the surface, that I haven't read many things that are able to do it on the same level. On the one hand, you have Ben, who just absolutely refuses to relate or put any effort towards what Miko feels is important. He is constantly tearing down things that she sees value in, and he is not very supportive. And on the other hand, you have Miko, who kind of lets Ben do it, but also at the same time expects things out of him that he has never shown in the past. It's, you know, she wants him to change, and unfortunately Ben is not willing to change. And I think that is just such an interesting dynamic that gets pitted against each other here. Now, part of Ben's problem is he definitely has some resentment towards propping up Asian culture, and that's something that happens very early on in the first couple pages of this book. They are at a Asian inspired art or film festival, and Ben just thinks that everything about it is bad, and Miko thinks pretty much everything about it is good. She likes that the representation is happening. And I can't really speak on some of these racial undertones because they're not something that I have ever dealt with personally, but I did find it to be an interesting element to put a wedge into this relationship. This book revolves around not even misunderstandings, but almost willful determination to see the worst in each other, almost. And maybe that's a little bit extreme, but I don't know. Parts of that just resonated with me so much in past relationships that I have personally had, where expectations are not being met from each other. People go out of their way to do things and probably say things that they know is going to bother another person. And also just that build up to what you know is the inevitable end of the relationship. And it can sometimes just be such a slow, creeping, meandering thing, and sometimes it can be just such a quick chop that just kind of ends everything. And so once again, that is just what made this book so special. It just, I don't know, maybe let me look back on past things in a completely not completely different light, but just in a way that felt good to be able to examine things. Sometimes when you're in those situations, it's so hard to look at anything critically, and it takes time and space to really be able to go back and look and say, yeah, something wasn't right here. I was wrong, they were wrong, we were both wrong, there were things going wrong. And I don't know, I think this book just did an absolutely phenomenal job at bringing that to the forefront. Now, I guess the only negatives I really do have to say about this isn't like a wholly original story, right? I mean, this kind of damaged relationship story has been told countless times. I don't think that it's anything that new. I will also say that Ben is not the most likable person, and I don't think he's supposed to be. I think you're supposed to see him to be incredibly flawed. But I think if you're going into this and you don't want to live in the headspace of somebody who is deeply flawed, has issues, who isn't really working on them in the best way, and is kind of like still trying to figure themselves out, you might heavily resent this story, because that is where we spend most of the time. We are shown how he is trying to justify his actions, how he thinks he is right, and I can definitely see how that would trigger people in a negative light. But I think if you look at it more from a third perspective point of view, where you are kind of outside of the story, more of a omniscient viewer, you can see the negatives from both Ben and Hiko and how things just aren't going to work, and how there are both things that they both need to do to be better. But like I said, there are going to be people who read this and see Ben as just such a bad person that it's going to completely put them off. I think another thing that might put some people off is some of those racial undertones are definitely in here, and I'm sure there are people who are going to have all kinds of opinions about that, and that's not something I would try to touch with a 10-foot pole. One, because I don't have any experiences in it, and two, it just doesn't sound like it would be the most helpful conversation. I feel like that's just something that normally devolves into name calling and stuff that's not worth it. But if you are looking for a story that I think can touch you, especially if you have had some of those relationships that I was talking about that fail in not like a explosive way, but just in that slow buildup, that tension of small cuts that lead you to the dam breaking, I think this could definitely be something that resonates with you. But that is all I have for Shortcomings. Please pick this up. Don't be scared that it is a graphic novel. I highly recommend checking it out. And as always, have a good one.